and speaking out for YAP, but next year I'll officially be the president of Young America's Foundation, and I'm thrilled about it, particularly with all these exciting young people in it.
Yeah. So we experience a lot on college campuses, this demonization of conservatives, this view automatically, and your staff experienced that, and your supporters in Wisconsin. Can you talk a little bit about where that's coming from and how we fight back?
Well, the left just wants total power. So we saw it with the president, with the impeachment. We saw it years ago with my recall. We saw it with me and my staff, my supporters, with the John Doe investigations. We see it time and time again. The left will do just about anything to recapture power. It's all about power to them. For us, it's about big ideas, whether it's tax relief or empowering people. For them, it's increasingly about power. And so you see it on college campuses, you see it in government, you see it in the media. They try to intimidate people. That's why the book I have is actually called Unintimidated. It talks about what we did in Wisconsin and how we pushed back and won, and how others across the country can do that. We got to do the same thing on college campuses. YAF did a poll last year that showed that 78% of the conservative students on campus said they were afraid to talk about their beliefs, not just because their professors would give them grief, but because other students would. That's how pushed back they are, and we got to turn that around.
Yeah. How do we become unintimidated? What can conservatives?
One thing is big, bold ideas, and then you got to follow up on it. Both as elected officials have to follow through, and parts of their teams have to follow through. But I also think, again, for a place like this, conservatives, those watching at home or at office, wherever you're at, we've got to not only push it as elected officials, we got to support people, not just when they run, but when they have the courage to follow through on their conviction, we got to support them. One of the best things that happened for me was people coming out of the woodwork, not just in campaigns, but holding rallies, showing up, writing messages on social media, in the newspaper, wherever else. Even just simple things like coming to me at visits and tours and just praying with me. Big, important things to help people, once they're in office, know that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And I've got a new book about the Southern Poverty Law Center, the demonization that they do, the defamation. In Michigan, right across from Wisconsin, there's an attorney general who opened a hate crimes unit targeting groups that are unfairly called hate groups by the SPLC. And one of those, YAF actually, a YAF chapter was accused of being a hate group. So where does that come from?
It's just ridiculous because to me, it goes back, free speech should be free speech anywhere, but particularly in our college campuses.
Really.
Now, we have a right to call out not just political beliefs, but if there are things that we think are disgusting or don't like, call them out. But what you've seen the left do, and you see it in your book, is the left has weaponized a pushback against any idea that doesn't fit their objectives. And they call it things. Not only with this group, as you outlined, you see it all the time in the press and social media. They don't like something, it's always an ism. It's racism, it's whatever they don't like, instead of just saying, no, people can have a different opinion, we can debate about it. I actually think for those who engage with those sorts of attacks, it really diminishes the true acts that need to be called out, the true things that are wrong when it comes to race or sex or other issues out there. But we live in a society where the left brings it up so often that I fear long term it starts to remove, people take it for granted that just anyone who disagrees is going to say that, when there are legitimate cases that need to be called out, but the left uses it all the time for their own political gain.
Yeah. And we have a president in the White House who fights back firmly against those things, but also who I think could learn a little bit from Wisconsin, but it's a totally different ball game. And
it is. Mike Pence and I have been good friends for a long time. We talk a lot because much of what the president, vice president, and this administration are going through, we went through just a few years ago in Wisconsin. I mean, we did what we said we were going to do, not just with unions and collective bargaining. We did it on, we passed a photo ID law. We passed right to work for all employees, the freedom to choose. We did pro-life legislation. We defunded Planned Parenthood. We did concealed carry and castle doctrine. We did prevailing wage reform. We did welfare reform. We did education reform. We cut taxes by over $13 billion. And the left went bonkers. But we just kept going back and back. Now, my style, I'm on Twitter, but my style is a little bit different than the president's. But I think that was befitting of the Midwest. There's a little bit of that Midwest nice. People wanted me to be firm, but to still be happy and decent and and uplifting to people, and that's exactly what we've done. I took that really out of another Midwesterner style, that being Ronald Reagan.
Welcome to another episode of CPAC Live. We all mourn the passing of John Lewis, who somebody is a true civil rights hero. I think President Bush said it best when he said that we all had a lot of political disagreements with John Lewis, but that doesn't diminish his role in our history working towards racial equality. I have to say, as a conservative and as a Republican, I'm very proud of my party's history when it comes to embracing the idea of one man, one vote, one person, one vote, that all of us are created equal. The whole concept of America's founding and the whole concept of the Republican Party's founding is consistent with this idea of human dignity, even though our country, of course, started off with the birth defect of slavery, something that we fought a civil war over. Abraham Lincoln led us ably, kept the Union together, brought it back together. And then we eventually passed 3 amendments to the Constitution. That's how conservatives wish to change the Constitution, by doing the constitutionally authorized process of passing amendments, giving African Americans, blacks, the right, ending slavery, giving them the right to vote, and allowing them, obviously, to be citizens in every way. But I think when you see these Democrats go to these funerals, which are great and solemn occasions and important occasions for all of us, I think, number one, it brought home the fact that when you had governors saying you can't have funerals, that was really a tragic decision. You need to have funerals. People need to be honored. It's not just Democrats who need to be honored. All Americans should be allowed to be honored. The second thing is, I don't think a funeral is a great place or appropriate place to have a political rally. The Democrats have done this on any number of occasions. And I had the chance to listen to Barack Obama's eulogy, which was much more of a political campaign type of rally than a eulogy. And it reminded me how much harm President Obama has done to this country. He could have been a man of history and is a man of history as our first elected black president. But he really created more racial animosity than any of this healing that I think he tries to claim credit for. And when he took to the podium and said that basically the filibuster is a vestige of Jim Crow or racism in this country, it just brought it all home. You know, Barack Obama had no problem with the filibuster when Republicans had majorities in the House and Senate and President Trump was in the White House. He didn't say a word about the filibuster, because the Democrats used the filibuster to try to stop President Trump's agenda, never brought it up. Now that there's a House majority under Nancy Pelosi and the squad, and a lot of coverage about how Schumer could be making gains and maybe even get the majority in the Senate. I'm not predicting that, but it's certainly in the realm of possibilities. Now Obama takes a stand and cloaks racism around this concept of the filibuster, because then if Republicans in a minority try to use the filibuster, it'll be seen as racist. This kind of logic is not lost on the practical and common sense minded American people. They understand that they're just tossing out racism in a cheap way for a political gain of the Democratic Party, whose history is all about racism. And that's kind of the point, isn't it? Which is, if the filibuster needs to be scrapped because it's a vestige of Jim Crow, doesn't the Democratic Party need to be scrapped as the creators of Jim Crow? Or do we get to understand our past and our history and move forward and make progress? It's good that the Democratic Party has moved away from Jim Crow. And it's good that the Republican Party has moved forward and made changes itself in some of its positions. One of the positions that the Republican Party has embraced is understanding the right to life of the unborn, a very important thing. People can change over time. But if we're not going to allow entities or parties to ever make changes and make up for the past, then let's be consistent about it. And when we go to funerals, let's pray for the person who's lost their struggle and pray for their families. And let's leave the political speeches to political conventions, if they'll ever let us have those again. We're going to be right back with the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, and after her, we're going to be joined by Pastor Darrell Scott. Both are great friends of CPAC. We'll be right back at you after this video.
If schools do not reopen, the funding should go to parents to send their child to public, private, charter, religious, or homeschool of their choice. The key word being choice. If the school is closed, the money should follow the student, so the parents and families are in control of their own decisions. So we'd like the money to go to the parents of the student. This way they can make the decision that's best for them.
We're now joined by the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. Madam Secretary, thanks for being on CPAC Live.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be with you.
We were just chit-chatting over the fact that Mercy and I have 5 kids, and they went through this experiment of online learning. Some of them did better than others, but all of them really hated it. And the young ones, it's particularly tough on because they're just not getting that social interaction. And it's easier in our house because they have a lot of other kids to hang out with. But what's your message to parents who are going through this terrible struggle of trying to figure out what their school districts are going to do and how they're going to balance that decision with those who have to figure out a way to go to their own jobs?
Well, Matt, the bottom line message is this: parents and kids can't be held captive to others' fears or agendas. And we're seeing too much of this developing in districts across the country. When given a choice of 2 days a week in person in class or 0 days, and then a decision later in Fairfax County, for example, to go to all online, that's simply not tenable for all too many kids and all too many families. Parents have got to raise their voices and articulate their expectations for their kids. Kids have got to be in school. They've got to be with their friends. They've got to be with their teachers. That is where they are going to be healthiest ultimately. We know that this can be done safely and it can be done well. It's just a matter of how in each specific location. I had the opportunity to visit a school in the Raleigh, North Carolina area with the vice president a couple of days ago. And we visited a 4th grade classroom, and these kids were so excited to be back in school. This is a year-round model, so they normally would come back in July. And I asked these 4th graders, what was the best thing about coming back to school? And to a person, they said, being with my friends, seeing my friends, being together with my friends. It was so fun to see their joy just with being back together.
That is so true. My 10-year-old is very, very social. And what I noticed in her is they really get down when they can't be with their friends and do sports. And they like to do music and theater. And, you would really see the emotion come out of them when they're not able to be with their kids. We're often lectured to by national education unions and stuff that it's all about the kids. But what's interesting in this debate is it seems like many people are not talking about the kids in the sense that kids are really not, very fortunately, kids are really not those most vulnerable to this virus.
Right, exactly. None of the data shows that kids are at risk or great risk at all. They've been, getting the virus in the lowest percentage of the population, and there's lots of evidence that they're not passing it on and transmitting it to others. And so the focus needs to be on ensuring that they can get back into classrooms, back into routines, and thinking of the most vulnerable students, the ones who really do need that structure and routine the most. How perpetuating this distance experience is going to only have them fall farther and farther and farther behind. This is a long-term, this has major long-term implications for our country if we don't get this right going into this new academic year. And we have got to, all parents have got to urge their schools to do the right thing for their students. And where they simply refuse to, parents have to have choices. And they have to be able to find the situation that's going to work for their family. And they have to be able to take the resources meant for their child to go do just that.
And you oversee a lot of resources, obviously, at the Department of Education. What can you do constructively to help those schools that really want to be open in a safe and responsible manner? And also maybe not fund people that are not being responsible. What tools do you have?
Well, the Department of Education has very few tools to actually assist schools directly, but we have given the maximum amount of flexibility possible, recognizing that these solutions are best decided at the most local level. And of course, Congress has appropriated through the CARES Act over $13 billion already to schools. Only 2% of it has actually been drawn down. So there's more resources there to do the things necessary in the classrooms to get ready for kids being there and for teachers being there. And we have continued to help with technical assistance for anyone who is requesting it. And of course, the CDC and other health and medical organizations have provided very good input and very good things, reference tools to help individual education leaders decide what's going to work best in their environment and in their particular situation.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that consistent with our philosophy is not every education decision needs to be made at the Department of Education. We love the idea of local control, but it is ironic that homeschooling has always been a choice, and many people on the left have often said it's a terrible choice. Now they seem comfortable with it for everybody, as long as it's mandated by many of these areas. And what you're basically saying is let parents choose.
Exactly. For those parents who know that it's best for their children to be learning in person 5 days a week in a classroom, they should have that opportunity and that option. And we know it can be done safely. And for those who are concerned because their child has some underlying health vulnerability, well, they should have a very robust, full-time, online, distance learning option. Or they should be able to, group up with a small group of friends and other families to form their own kind of, approach. I'm hearing about these different pods that are forming up, and
Right.
homeschooling has certainly taken a great interest for a lot of people. But the point is, I think if we've learned anything in the last 5-6 months, it's that education, K-12 education in particular, has got to be much more nimble and much more flexible for all students, acknowledging that all students are unique and different. And that education has to reflect that.
Yeah, totally right. One of the things that we've all read about and as parents we're concerned about is how much screen time a kid gets. And one of the downsides of online schooling is that kids are now spending many more hours than is recommended by professionals, looking at screens, interacting with screens. And then, of course, they're doing their recreation on screens. And then for like my daughters, they're doing any extracurricular activities on screens. If you look at the screen time, it's pretty alarming. What are you and I aren't doctors, but for those people, those medical professionals, when you talk to them, are they alarmed at the fact that we might be pushing too much screen time on our kids?
Well, I think it's a concern for all parents, isn't it? And I know that many parents have found themselves in the position of actually advocating much more screen time than they know is really good or healthy for their child,
right,
simply because they had to do other things, or they were having to do the lessons as distributed by the local district. And again, I think these are very important and healthy questions that parents need to be asking about their kids and their future. And collectively, education leaders need to be looking at how they provide robust full-time education in a distance environment for those who need it, and doing so where it's not going to be an overload on screen time. How can we use the out of doors in a whole new way, and
Right.
how can we utilize a lot of the different resources? I think, you think about museums, and I know that many of them are still closed and things, but I'm hopeful that people are going to figure out creative ways of giving access to so many resources that are available in our own hometowns and in our neighboring communities, so that kids can learn in ways that are going to continue to challenge them, and that families are going to be able to have the choices and the options that are right for their family at that particular time.
So I keep hearing from you, not that Betsy DeVos wants to tell parents what to do or local school districts what to do, but what I hear from you is a very stout defense on the fact that if parents want to have in-person learning, they have the right to have that. Is that correct?
Well, yes. I mean, education is a promise that we make to students and parents. And if the other end of the deal is not, if they're not holding up
Right.
their end of the deal, parents need to have those resources to take to ways and environments that are actually going to provide that education opportunity. So yes, I think all students need to have in-person, a robust full-time in-person opportunity. And for those for whom it just doesn't work for whatever reason, they need to have options too.
The one of the things that your colleague Bill Barr has also done is make sure through the Trump administration that religious institutions aren't held to a higher bar than secular institutions. And so what's happening in the DC area, in the Catholic diocese that my family is affiliated with, these schools are by and large opening 5 days a week. With new protocols for the health concerns, valid health concerns with this virus. But I fear, trying to look around the corner, that some will try to say that's an unsafe environment and take the bishop or the diocese on for having those schools open. This could happen all over the country, both in public schools and in parochial schools. As we go forward, hopefully this won't happen, but what are parents going to do if this turns into a legal clash? And who in the administration is thinking through what would be the proper constitutional steps for the president to take?
Well, we know that many small faith-based schools are actually, there's a lot more interest in families being able to access them. And the concern, frankly, right now is that for many kids whose families do want to, they simply can't afford to
That's
be
right.
able to send their children there. And so, again, I go back to the point made earlier, that families and parents need to be able to have options if their school, if their particular school, their assigned school, or the district in which they live is not going to meet their needs. They need to be able to take resources and go to a school that is going to meet their needs. And so, the administration has been very vigorous in its defense of the independence of faith-based schools and institutions, and will continue to be. But I think the point here, and I'll go back to the school that I visited with the vice president earlier, was a private school, and had decided that this was the right thing for their students. And of course, they have great demand on the part of other families who want to have their kids there as well. The fact that there is that kind of demand, there was before, there's increasing demand now, continues to suggest that parents have got to be given a lot more control over their children's education and their educational futures. And I think that this coronavirus pandemic is bringing a lot more focus to the fact that this is just simply not happening in too many places. And there are too many places that are letting families down.
Betsy DeVos, we know we have to let you get back to your busy schedule, but as one final question, there's so much depressing, so much tragedy associated with this coronavirus outbreak. But maybe sometimes out of great evil, sometimes people do things that create some real good. Do you think out of the tragedy that's really racked our economy, so many families, maybe those folks involved in education, mostly parents, maybe we'll see some reforms that have been needed for a long time. We'll try to make the best of a bad situation.
I think I think there will be many silver linings to what has been a very difficult period to navigate and tragedy for many families. And, I think that's how a lot of Americans look at challenges, right? We're a can-do country. We find solutions when we're faced with problems. And I think that this is going to be borne out in the whole realm of education. And I think that's going to be to the benefit, it has to be to the benefit of kids ultimately and their futures.
Well, I just want to applaud your courage to even serve in these times of political meanness and nastiness, but also for your courage specifically to stand up for parents and kids who want to go back to 5-day-a-week in-person schooling. And that appreciation goes to the president as well, who sure takes a ration every day for doing what's right for our kids and our families. Thanks for joining us, Betsy DeVos on CPAC Live. You're a great friend of ours, and we appreciate all you do.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to be right back with Pastor Darrell Scott after this short video. We're now joined by Pastor Darrell Scott of the New Spirit Revival Center, someone you see on TV all the time, a very bold and courageous conservative who always has interesting opinions on what's going on in the world. And Pastor Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, man. It's my pleasure.
You and I have had so many great conversations without cameras on, so we're going to attempt to have one with the cameras rolling. But I can't talk to you without initially saying, because I haven't talked to you since all this Black Lives Matter violence across the country has started in all of our major cities. What's your reaction to what's happening to these families and businesses that occupy these cities?
First, let me go on record as stating that Black Lives Matter as a slogan, as a saying, as a precept, as a truth, the slogan itself is very noble. The slogan itself, even though I would add a suffix to it and say Black Lives Matter too, or Black Lives Matter as well. However, the organization itself, no, they're using their slogan as a cover for a lot of nefarious, insidious, underhanded criminal intent for whatever their purposes are. They're using that slogan as a cover to mask their true intent, which is to undermine the fabric of American society. This protest, this violence, this destruction, this mayhem, this chaos, this anarchy, it's ridiculous. It's despicable. And I applaud the president's efforts. First of all, the president's speaking out against it. And then I applaud his efforts to counteract and nullify it as well. But it's horrible. It's despicable. It's something that has no place in American society.
So when you see these ball diamonds or basketball courts with the slogan Black Lives Matter, knowing who's behind it, who's funding it, who's running it, should the American people say, hey, you know, it's true that Black Lives Matter and I should be comfortable with watching that? Or are we being manipulated by these Marxists with a nice slogan? And should we turn away when we see the slogan on our television sets and, you know, just all throughout sports now?
I'm gonna be honest, Matt. I've been a sports fan all my life, but it's turning me off to sports when I see this. You know, this whole Black Lives Matter in the NBA and the NFL and the MLB. It's dumb, flat out dumb. And, you have a bunch of kids. These athletes are a lot of kids that are coming in trying to form and shape American society according to their own immature mindsets, that when they're older, when they get to be of a different age, they'll look back and tell themselves that what they were doing was pretty ridiculous. The NBA and the other sports agencies, it's not about black to them. It's about green. They don't want to alienate a fan base, and they're caving into social pressure, and they're doing things. They're putting a Band-Aid on something that actually needs surgery, and it's pretty ridiculous. And they'll look back on it and say they're ridiculous. I had a conversation with Jim Brown maybe about a year ago, because Jim Brown was very socially active in the 60s. However, he took a different approach, and he and some other athletes. And I said, Jim, why are the athletes of today so different than the athletes of your generation? And Jim said, well, because the athletes of my generation, the professional athletes, all had college degrees. They were all graduates, where you have a lot of these guys that really haven't even really picked up a book since middle school. They've been coddled, nurtured, pampered, because they knew they were going to wind up playing basketball. And so they were able to take easy classes just to get through high school, do one and done in college, go straight to the NBA. And now they're all of a sudden speaking to masses, and they really don't have much substance to what they want to say. So they follow after they put, it's ridiculous. It's
Darrell,
ridiculous.
don't you think it's also a function of the fact that even when they did go to colleges, these colleges are not what they were. These colleges have become so radicalized, and the curriculum has become so watered down that you literally can spend a lot of time in courses that it's like radicalism for dummies.
Yeah, absolutely right. My grandchildren just turned 18 and they're going to college. But one thing I did with them during high school, and I'm going to continue to do with them in college, and I did it with my daughter when she went to college, was you learn, you get educated at college, but you're getting socialized at home. And so your social interactions are going to be based upon the foundation we built for you as parents and as grandparents to walk in. You're not going to allow these liberal college professors and these semi-kooks to form and shape your worldview. And we have a Christian base with it as well. So that Christian base is going to undergird their social interaction too.
Isn't it a tragedy, Pastor, that if I think of the two institutions that could help Black Americans the most, it's the family and the church.
Yes.
Those are the two institutions that are really going to be salvation for these young kids who are struggling in cities that are so dysfunctional. And that those are the two institutions that Black Lives Matter Incorporated seems to criticize the most in their really disgusting manifesto of their beliefs. They think that the family is, paternalistic, evil part of Western civilization. I don't know how they get to that. And the church ripping down statues of Jesus and Mary and beheading saints of the church and saying Christopher Columbus was terrible because he brought Christianity to this part of the world. I just, it's kind of like what's up is down. What's your reaction to that as a pastor?
Well, first of all, Black Lives Matter wants to replace the authority figures or the moral compasses of the Black community with their own, for lack of a better term, theology or their own sociology. So we have to undermine the family. When I say we, I mean they. They have to undermine the family structure, and they have to undermine the fiber or the fabric of the church in order to replace the church and family as guiding figures in the lives of the Black community. They know what they're doing. They have a nefarious intent behind all of their activity. I'm a Christian pastor, so I say it this way: they're being used by the devil. The
Right.
devil is using them to continue to subvert and to subjugate and to dominate the Black community. They're using violence, they're using chaos, destruction, but they're also using peer pressure, and they're using ignorance. Now, when I say ignorance, I'm not saying stupidity. When I say ignorance, I'm saying it in the sense of being unlearned. The average man on the street, someone that's in an inner city community, and they might be experiencing poverty or distress in their life, they're not going to read that entire manifesto. They're just going to hear the words Black Lives Matter and think to themselves that this is the way to go. It's almost a fad, but they're capitalizing upon this fad to take advantage of an entire community to try to undermine, once again, the fabric of American society and to promote liberalism, to promote different agendas that are in contradistinction to the family.
You know, it's interesting you say liberalism, but I think it's even worse than that, because kind of your old-fashioned liberal like the idea of each individual having the ability to make decisions in their life. This new kind of radicalized leftist agitator wants to shut you down, and one of the ways the people they seem to hate the most are people like you, who are black voices who are contrary to theirs. You know, I looked at a recent Gallup poll that when you take the donkey and the elephant out of the equation, the big parties in America, and they asked black Americans, you know, what their ideology was, 25% of blacks in this poll, which I assume is even underrated, 25% of blacks said they were conservative.
Yes.
That doesn't surprise you, does it?
No, it doesn't. Actually, the number is much higher, because I'm just being honest. A lot of black people, we don't take polls. We don't do polls. You know,
I don't blame you.
I told a joke to Jared Kushner one time, talking about the black community. I said, when someone knocks on your door, Jared, what do? He said, I go to the door. I said, when someone knocks on a black person's door, we go to the window. We go to the window first to see who's at the door. So,
Right.
you know, we shy away from polls and different things like that. But, you know, blacks are conservative by nature because of our church upbringing, our church foundation. We are very conservative by nature. We identify conservatism more as practice than party. But when people try to attach our conservatism to a particular party, and then they say that particular party is against us, then it becomes a problem. You have to understand, and I say this all the time, in the 2016 elections, they did not appeal to the black community on any intellectual basis to not vote for Donald Trump. They gave us emotional reasons. He hates you. He's a racist. If you know, I had someone come up to me one time and they were serious. They said, you know, if Donald Trump gets reelected, we're all getting shipped back to Africa. And I said, that's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I couldn't do anything but shake my head. I said, what are they going to do? If he gets elected, they're going to order all black people to report to the docks or something, and we're getting put on a big boat and sent over to Africa and put out where? It's just dumb. Women were treated the same way, emotional reasons. Latinos were treated the same way, emotional reasons. He hates you, he's a misogynist, he's a sexist, he's a racist. Now, the white man was given intellectual reasons, the economy, terrorists, foreign policy, domestic policy, all of those things, but we were given emotional. They played on our emotions, and you see right here in 2020, they're playing on the emotions of the black community again. They're trying to appeal to the black community on the basis of you are an oppressed segment of society, and you must rise up against the oppressors. How do we rise up against the oppressors? Burn everything down, steal everything you can, tear up everything you can, and shoot and kill each other. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And, you know, some of us are buying into it.
The victims are black business owners in these communities. The victims are, you know, I've read these tragic stories of the black kids and children of color who have been shot dead or victims of the violence in other ways. You know, that's the saddest part of all this is the victims are black people by and large. And I have to think that when I see these grandmothers and these tear-soaked videos about the deaths of their grandchildren, because of the violence being fueled by Black Lives Matter, I have to think that there's a lot of people in those communities that see the violence and the radicalism as destructive.
They do. You know, the Black Lives Matter organization has turned into a combination of ambulance chasers and shakedown artists. And so they capitalize on events that they can cause national attention to come to, such as when a white police officer kills a black person. They can capitalize on that. When you have black children being killed and the black community being distressed because of the activity of black people, you won't hear anything on that. But the thing that also gets me is this. You don't hear anything about these black babies getting killed from the athletes. You don't hear about it from the entertainers. It's almost like they're complicit in the ambulance chasing. They're complicit in the shaking down. You know, they'll use these events to shake down the NBA, to shake down corporations, to get money out of them and make them further and help promote their agenda. Because they say, if you don't, you know, we'll come after you next. But when you see, once again, these babies getting killed, these victims of random violence, you saw a funeral where there was a drive-by shooting, 14 to 15 people got shot. You've got a body count coming out of Chicago that reminds me of Vietnam back in the 60s and 70s, and they're quiet about it. The masses are quiet. The masses of blacks are quiet. And in fact, if a white person steps up and says something about it, they'll have the nerve to tell the white person, you shut up. This is none of your business. You don't talk about it. We'll handle this on our own. But they're not handling. You don't hear the voices of the so-called black leaders, the Al Sharpton and others. You don't hear them saying anything about it. You don't see them rushing to do the funerals for these babies. You don't see anyone trying to cover the expenses of these funerals because they can't capitalize upon it and use it to further a racial divide in this country.
Well, as a man of God, I think your words are, really resound with us. But help us understand, as you talk to people in your church community, we have to have great hope. We have a Savior. We know that He reigns. We know that there's a better life in front of us, not just this one. Should Americans be optimistic? Do you feel optimistic? And do you think that out of this great tragedy of a coronavirus, Chinese corona, this racial animosity being stoked by people who really hate America and want to scrap America, are there enough people who love America, warts and all, with all of our imperfections, to get America into a better place, into a better spot?
I don't believe that this is going to continue, and I really don't believe that this anarchy and this chaos is going to triumph over good. As long as there are believers in the Lord in this country, the Lord's hand will continue to be on this country. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care who tries to say otherwise. This nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. I had someone contest me about that one time. Why would you say it's Judeo-Christian? I said the foundation of Judaism is the 10 Commandments, and all of the 10 Commandments are things that speak to us morally. And Christianity says, love your fellow man and love God even as you love yourself. So Judeo-Christian principles undergird this nation. And there are enough of us, there are enough believers in the Lord, and there are enough people who believe in the American ideal, the ideals of America, that we will continue to hold those forces of evil, those insidious, chaotic forces at bay, and we ultimately will triumph. I find it amusing that the same people that want to disregard and disrespect our flag wanted it lowered half-mast for John Lewis, wanted that same flag draped across his casket. So, people are confused right now. The Bible says, without a vision, my people perish. And there are a lot of people that don't have a vision of and for this country, and they're being unrestrained. The flag represents the ideals. The flag represents everything that is good about America and good about the citizenry of America. So we don't want to disrespect and disregard that. We're going to hold that flag up. And there are a number of us, once again, we're going to stand strong and stand firm against these forces of anarchy and disruption that are seeking to undermine our country. And we will prevail, especially when we have a strong leadership, president that has, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, that has a set of balls. And he's not afraid.
It's too late, Darrell. It's too late. You already got us in trouble.
He's not afraid to stand up against this mess and say, I'm going to stand up and put a stop to it. And you know what? Every time he stands up and says, you know what, I'm going to put a stop to it, you see it diminishing because they know he means business.
So I got to tell you this, Pastor Scott, that I remember going out to one of our CPAC events, and this older lady in a walker, ambled her way up to me slowly. And I thought she was coming to talk to me. And she got down into my ear, and I thought she'd say, God bless you, or, thank you for what you do. And she said, tell the Republican Party to grow a pair. So, everyone's got their own way of saying it. Pastor Darrell Scott of the New Spirit Revival Center, we really applaud your courage. We love the fact that you're getting out there and speaking truth, and just thank you for all you do, and thank you for loving America.
Hey, I'm born and raised. I'm an American.
That's right, I am too, and I'm proud of it.
I am too.
And I fly the flag, and I loved your analogy about the flag, and it's important that we have things that bring us together. And one of the things that brings us together is the ability to respect each other, and hear from each other. And that's why we're going to keep doing this show at CPAC Live. And another person who loved America and who is really dear to all of us and who we are so appreciative to God that he gave him to us, and we pray for his family, was the great Herman Cain. And we have a video tribute for Herman Cain, and we thank you all for watching today.
With the approval of the 111th Congress, authorized nearly $1 trillion, which was supposed to stimulate the economy and create jobs. They did all of this spending, made government bigger, and now they want to ignore the fact that it did not work. But I got a message for the administration. We noticed it didn't work.